On GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good evening. I'm broadcasting you live from Iowa. The caucus takes place at 7 p.m. here this evening. I'll be joined by Jason Miller, who is Trump's chief advisor. We'll also look at the recent strikes against the Houthis, ask what next. Are we really perhaps now going to war with Iran? We'll also look and see, are the Tories actually facing a 1997 style wipeout in the polls, or is it just, as some newspapers suggest, all the fault of the Reform Party? And we'll look at the Rwanda latest, where the Tories appear to be very, very split. But all of that comes after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom is that Rishi Sunak is facing multiple rebellions this week as crucial debates take place on the Rwanda bill. It comes as new figures reveal that more than 200 migrants crossed the Channel in small boats at the weekend. And yesterday, 5 migrants died in the Channel after their small boat got into difficulties just off the coast of Boulogne. In an exclusive interview with GB News, the Prime Minister said the Rwanda scheme is still the deterrent the UK needs.
Your heart breaks when you hear these stories about people dying. They're being exploited by criminal gangs, and that's why we've got to resolve this issue. There's lots of reasons why, and we should talk about them, but one of them is that innocent people are being exploited by criminal gangs. That's not right. There's nothing compassionate about it, and in fact the compassionate thing to do is to tackle illegal migration, and that's what our Rwanda scheme will do. I've been Prime Minister for a year, just over, and in that time we've actually reduced the number of people coming here by over a third. That hasn't happened before. No one else has managed to achieve that.
Well, in Westminster tonight, the Conservatives campaign director, Isaac Levido, is currently addressing a special election meeting of the 1922 committee. They convened about 45 minutes ago, and that meeting ongoing. It's a gathering of backbench Conservative MPs coming amid the latest polling that suggests the party is facing an election wipeout. A major new poll by YouGov predicted the Conservatives would retain just 169 seats and Labour would sweep to power with a huge majority. But it's being reported that senior MPs are very sceptical about the latest data, and we will no doubt hear the outcome of that meeting very soon. Now, the other main story on GB News today, girls were left at the mercy of paedophile grooming gangs due to failings by senior police and council leaders in Manchester. That's according to a new comprehensive report covering nearly 10 years of failed investigations by Greater Manchester Police. It highlights years of widespread, organised sexual abuse of children in the Rochdale area, despite what it described as compelling evidence reported to the authorities as early as 2004. Former police detective Constable Maggie Oliver told GB News today she's pleased to see the report, but it is too little, too late.
It is the truth, but it's not a truth that was new to me. What makes me feel so angry is that it's taken 12 years to get it formally documented. And this isn't just a report. This is about lives destroyed. This is about children who have been criminalised, children who have been blamed, abusers who have been allowed to continue to abuse and go unchecked.
Maggie Oliver. Now, international news, and Rishi Sunak has commented today that Houthi rebels are continuing on what he described as a reckless path after an anti-ship ballistic missile struck a US-owned vessel off the coast of Yemen. Reports from the region suggesting the Iran-allied group are now expanding their attacks to include UK ships, calling them legitimate targets. The latest threats follow joint US-UK strikes launched on Yemen last week. And the Prime Minister says the solution in Yemen will not, though, stop the UK from supporting other crises around the world. Here at home, commuters are in for a fresh series of delays as the ASLEF Rail Union announces more strike action. Train drivers taking part in a rolling programme of one-day walkouts from the end of this month, including a ban on overtime. The union saying it's aiming to put pressure on what it describes as a tone-deaf government, and it's calling for drivers to get their first pay rise in 5 years. And we're in for some rather chilly days ahead here in the UK as cold air blowing in from the Arctic brings snow and ice to parts of the country. The Met Office warning temperatures will be about 6 degrees lower than usual for this time of year. And a snow and ice warning is also in place until tomorrow across Northern Ireland, Scotland and East Anglia. Time to wrap up warm. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker. Let's cross live now to Iowa in the United States for Farage.
Well, good evening. Yep, I'm live from Iowa. I have to say, when we arrived on Sunday morning, the temperature was, what, about 20 to 30 below with wind chill on top of that. So it has been viciously cold. And yet, completely undeterred, you've got candidates standing who want to be the Republican candidate for president, going around, holding meetings, holding events, big packed crowds. And at 7 o'clock tonight, over 1,500 caucuses will take place all across the state of Iowa. Democracy is alive and well here, and it all feels so much more exciting, so much more engaging than anything that happens in our electoral process. Now, yesterday, I went to an event that President Trump was doing, and somehow he spotted me in the crowd.
We can also do. Is that Nigel Farage, by the way? Oh, you stand up, will you? I'm just looking at this handsome guy. He's been a backer of mine from day one. I think go Brexit, very non-controversial. And you've been right. They haven't implemented too well, but you've been right. No, we're big fans. Thank you, Nigel. It's really an honor to have you here. Great. You look great. I love these suits. You know, they know how to dress over there. We don't know how to dress like they do. Thank you. Great honor, man. Nikki Haley even supported.
Well, there was Donald Trump being very complimentary about me, but I guess he's right. I have supported him ever since 2016. I've never wavered in that, and I do believe he made the world a much safer place as president. Now, he is hot favourite to win this caucus at 7 p.m. this evening. He's hot favourite to be the Republican candidate in November, and looking at American polls, he's now leading in nearly all of the key swing states. But before we get to Iowa, Rishi Sunak today giving a statement to the Commons, making it clear he will not hesitate to act against Houthi targets. And this is predominantly the Brits and the Americans attacking Houthi bases. And this comes on the day that another missile has struck a US-owned vessel off the coast of Yemen. The situation is pretty serious. I'm joined down the line by Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Chris, you know, OK, we launch a couple of strikes against Houthi targets, but it's worth reminding people that the Saudis have been attacking Houthi targets for years. This is not going to be a straightforward, easy win, is it?
No, there's no easy win in war nowadays, Nigel. We've seen the democratization of violence and quite a lot of the technology that goes with warfare. It's not the preserve of states anymore. And what you've got here is a terrorist group that's got access to the sort of technologies you expect states to deploy. Well, that's no surprise because they're being supplied by two states, China and Iran. It is a problem. However, I think you'll find the other night that the Houthis took quite a hit from the United States and from ourselves. We probably took out about a quarter of their capability. And to tell you the truth, the number of strikes reduced. They've been singletons. They haven't been multiple strikes like we've seen. We've shown them our power. And frankly, what we're saying to them is, you know, that's what we can do. If you want more of that, just carry on.
And a question, Chris, for you. Our NATO allies, France, have once again decided to take a very different approach to us. They will not involve themselves on these strikes against the Houthis at all. I ask you, are the French really military allies of ours?
French, when it's in their interests, are allies of us. You know, obviously within NATO, they're pretty strong. And if we were attacked by what we call a pacing power or something like that, between Russia or China, then they'd be in there straight away. There's no question. They obviously have different interests to us. I think what is more remarkable, Nigel, is how feeble our other European allies have been. I mean, there's a reason for that. I don't think there's another European country that's got the capability to sit in the front line right now. And at the weekend, I was bemoaning the fact that most of our European allies can't fight and won't fight. So it's only really the Brits, ourselves, and the French that can be there. The French are there, to be fair. They've got a fairly high-priced frigate there that can shoot these things down. But you know what? The rest of our European allies haven't invested in the sort of technology we need to deal with this. That's why they're not there. It's not just a question of their political interests.
No, and it raises the question, of course, about our levels of capability, doesn't it, Chris? I mean, you know, here we are getting involved in this with a Royal Navy that becomes physically weaker and weaker and with less manpower.
Yeah, you and I have discussed before, Nigel, you know, the sea is the physical equivalent of the World Wide Web. And if we don't invest in our sea power, then we're not going to be involved in globalization. And this is a time when the likes of Russia, China, and Iran are trying to close down the world ocean, particularly the choke points that are vital to us. I think the government, to tell you the truth, I think the country is starting to get the message. And that sea blindness that we've seen in the past is starting to evaporate. You know, we're really good at this sort of thing. And our sailors have done really well in tracking the US in this. But the United States can't do it all on its own. And if you tot up the number of warships, for example, we've got in the free world, there's nearly 1,000 of them. We need to actually consolidate and coordinate our efforts to make sure that these totalitarian powers like Russia, China, Iran and North Korea don't get their way at sea in particular.
Yeah, and talking of Iran, Chris, you know, I wonder, are we really entering a proxy war with Iran? Is there a danger of serious escalation in the region?
I don't think Iran is ready to take on either the United States or the United Kingdom or anybody right now. They're going to continue to operate through their proxies, the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, and most recently, I think, South Africa, to tell you the truth. South Africa's engaged in this sort of lawfare against Israel. They're trying to extend it now to the United Kingdom and the United States. And we've got to accept that we are in a proxy war already. We're in a low-level confrontation with Russia, China, Iran and North Korea. They're strategically competing with us in practically every area. We're going to see more and more of these proxy actions, more encounter actions between our armed forces. And as long as the dots don't get joined up, we won't end up in a world war. But I'll tell you what, Nigel, it looks a lot like the tail end of the 1930s at the moment. The free world is having to confront fascism and communism again in reality. And I'm afraid to say some of the rhetoric, some of the character of today's sort of environment replicates what happened in the late 1930s.
Worryingly, I think you're right, Chris Parry, but thank you as ever for joining me on the programme. Well, some sobering words from the Rear Admiral there. Now, I'm joined by James Johnson, co-founder of JL Partners. James, just to begin quickly, and we'll talk about the UK polling in a minute and some of the rows we've seen in the last couple of days. Just quickly, Iowa looks like Trump's a long way ahead.
Yeah, Trump is pretty far ahead in the polls. DeSantis and Haley fighting for second place. The number to look out for tonight is Trump's support. If he gets below 40%, people will start questioning his grip on the race. They'll start talking about Haley and DeSantis potentially being able to nip at his heels in later primary contests. If he gets over 50%, I think a lot of people are going to be saying tonight, it's game over, we may as well all pack up and go home and, you know, get fast forward to the convention. So that's the number to watch.
40 and 50 were two big numbers to watch. Now, what on earth is going on in the UK? A poll out that's suggesting that the Tories go back to a sort of 97-style wipeout. But then some of our Conservative supporting newspapers suggesting this is all because of reform, and if reform weren't there, it could be a hung parliament. It's just nonsense, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the reason that voters are going to reform is because they're angry with the Conservative Party. So if reform wasn't there, I think they'd either go somewhere else or they wouldn't vote. So the problem is with the Conservative Party, not with any sort of new party or challenge from Labour or the Lib Dems. On the Labour side, voters are going for Labour despite Keir Starmer rather than because of him. They still worry about him and don't think he's strong enough. So the issue is the Conservative Party, and it's two things in particular. One is their approach to immigration. The voters do not feel they've got a grip on small boats. They do not feel they've got a grip on legal immigration either. Frankly, the Rwanda bill doesn't look set to address those concerns. And secondly is Rishi Sunak's style himself. Voters in 2024, they're looking for a strong person. That's why Trump's doing well here in Iowa.
Yeah.
They're looking for someone who can get things done and is plain speaking. And they don't view the PM as that. I did focus groups last week and people described the PM as limp, weak and spineless. If he doesn't turn that around, then he's going to be heading towards a very difficult result like the one in that poll.
Yeah, I guess what we've seen, the reform element is it's the Tory supporting newspapers trying to shift the blame somewhere else. But as you say, it's people are unhappy with the Conservatives. What impact do you think? A guess, I know, but George Galloway has announced he's entering the race for London Mayor. I just wonder about this, whether it's Jeremy Corbyn, whether it's George Galloway, whether they merge together. If they were to fight a significant number of seats at the next general election, and indeed against Sadiq Khan, could they be hurt from the left, Labour?
Well, I think if we were sat here a year ago, I'd be saying, oh, I'm not really sure, not really. But a big thing has changed, and that is the October 7th attacks in Israel and the ongoing conflict. And that has, quite frankly, radicalised a lot of people on the left who are very angry with Keir Starmer's response. And obviously Sadiq Khan has sort of flip-flopped a little bit on it as well. So I do think that leaves an opening for George Galloway, especially in those seats with a high Muslim majority, but also a high percentage of students as well, who often have more anti-Israel views than Muslims in Britain today. So I think that's possible. Jeremy Corbyn obviously has a constituency too. So I would expect that to see some votes come off Sadiq Khan. And remember, this time round, for the first time, the London mayoral race is first past the post. Whoever gets the most votes wins, and that makes it harder for Sadiq Khan because he usually relies on Lib Dems and the Greens' second preferences. He ain't going to get them this time.
No, he isn't. You're right. Although it does seem the Conservative candidate, Susan Hall, is making almost no impact whatsoever.
No, she's not doing particularly well. Basically, voters just don't know who she is. That is difficult for the Conservatives to try and cut through. Look, people will pay attention a little bit more as time comes, but clearly she's not the strongest candidate the Tories could have chosen either.
Doesn't seem so, does it? No. James Johnson, as ever, fascinating, and we'll see what happens tonight. So the numbers, James is saying to us, if Trump gets less than 40% of the primary vote, questions will be asked. If he gets more than 50, it is pretty much game over. And whilst the circus will move on to New Hampshire for the next primary, it will be pretty much done. Now, one of the candidates who's making a lot of noise out there and attracting more youth support than anybody else in the Republican Party is Vivek Ramaswamy. And I went at 8 o'clock this morning to watch him holding his first rally of the day. In a moment, we'll look at Vivek and what he stands for.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So regular viewers of this programme will have noted that I've met and interviewed Vivek Ramaswamy a few times before. He's the 38-year-old entrepreneur, made a lot of money, done very well in life, and seems to me to represent something of the future of the conservative movement here in America. I make no bones about it. I am very, very impressed by him. He may well in some of the debates have tried just a little bit too hard to make noise. I guess he is the new kid on the block. But boy, is he fighting hard and trying hard in this primary. There are 99 counties that make up Iowa, and he and Ron DeSantis would have done events in all 99 of them. The sheer amount of time and money these candidates are spending on getting these votes tonight at 7 o'clock is quite extraordinary. So this morning, just outside this main city of Des Moines, we went out at 8 o'clock this morning and saw Vivek doing his first meeting of the day. And I was pretty impressed. Take a look at this. The 15th, it is caucus day here in Iowa, and our day began at 8 o'clock this morning. We're in a restaurant in Urbandale, which is a small town outside of Des Moines, and this was Vivek Ramaswamy, his first event of the day. And I've got to tell you, this room was absolutely packed with people, lots and lots of media here as well. What was interesting was the ages. A lot of young people supporting Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, if you believe the polls, he's lying third or fourth. He thinks he's going to come in with a much stronger performance tonight. I sense he just might. And either way, Trump's going to win here in Iowa, but how Ramaswamy does, I think, is very important for the future of the Republican Party. This guy's 38, full of bags of energy. But I tell you something, coming from the UK, where our democracy feels almost beyond our fingertips, where it feels our vote doesn't really matter, to come and see the engagement, the involvement of people, and we'll see it again at 7 o'clock tonight where they turn up to actually vote in the caucuses. There's something really refreshing and impressive about the way the Americans do this.
And I believe it is going to take somebody now more than ever with fresh legs from the outside to reach and lead the new generation of Americans, to revive that missing national pride in this country, where we have been taught to celebrate our diversity and our differences so much that we forgot all of the ways that we are really the same as Americans, bound by that common set of ideals that set this country into motion.
I think the polls are wrong.
Interesting. Well, all candidates say that and think that, but we're going to find out later on this evening. And a little bit of an argument with Trump over the last few days.
I think I would call it less of an argument and maybe a one-way sense of frustration, but I can't speak for what his campaign advisors had. And what I'll say is Donald Trump's an excellent president. I've said that at every step. I respect the man. I love the man because he got this fight started. But now it's our job to finish it. And you know what? There are two America First candidates in this race. That's Donald Trump and myself. But I have fresh legs and I'm able to reach the next generation. And I'm worried. I'm worried for Trump. I'm worried for this country that this system will not let this man get anywhere near the White House again. And I've done everything I can to push back against these disastrous prosecutions and persecutions against him. I filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court last week, arguing for why they needed to overturn Colorado's disastrous decision. I've called on every other Republican to remove themselves from any GOP primary ballot where he's named. But at a certain point, we owe it to this country to see what's happening. The system wants to narrow this down to a two-horse race between Donald Trump and a puppet who they can control. They want to take Trump out in the spring or early summer and trot their puppet into the White House. That puppet has a name. Its name is Nikki Haley. And I think that that's actually the trick that's actually hiding in plain sight. And I worry that our movement, including the America First movement, is walking straight into it. I believe I am the future of America First to lead this to the next generation. And it's my job and duty to this country to do it. And so sometimes, all I'll say is sometimes the truth hurts.
Well, a lot of passion there, Vivek. How many more events today?
Oh, I haven't even counted. I mean, countless packed all the way through the Iowa caucus, at least 5 more. Plus, I'm going to be speaking at one of the caucus sites tonight, which makes that, according to normal day standards, a light day for us.
Very good. Thank you for joining us on GB News. Well done. Well, you see what I mean? The guy does have a huge amount of energy and passion. You can agree with him, disagree with him, but he's somebody in the long term in American politics that I believe cannot be ignored. And basically, he's on the same ticket in terms of policy as Donald Trump. He's part of that MAGA, that Make America Great Again side. And you can hear, speaking to him, that they see Nikki Haley as being the globalist and the devil. But polls suggest that Haley has been picking up support here in Iowa over the course of the last couple of weeks. And that kind of is the left-right divide that exists within the Republican Party in the USA. It's just that I think the whole Trump faction is several times bigger than the Haley faction. But we're going to find everything out at 7 o'clock tonight. But I repeat the point, it is such an exciting thing to be part of this caucus process, to see the energy, the enthusiasm of all the people that are turning up and wanting to take part in this. It really is impressive. And our voting system and we'll vote for this lot because the other lot seem worse, seems pretty miserable. Frankly, pretty dire by comparison. Now, a couple of what the Farage moments. It's that man again, Gary Lineker. He never, ever stops, does he? Because when the Palestinian campaign for the academic and cultural boycott of Israel, and that would include Israel being excluded from all world sports. When that gets put out on Twitter or X, as it's now known, what does Gary Lineker do? but he actually retweets it. Now, since that moment, he has deleted that, but time and again we see this game going on. This game going on where Gary Lineker, funded and paid for by the BBC, is able to ride roughshod over all of the rules of the BBC. And it's almost as if somehow Lineker is bigger and stronger and more powerful than anybody within the BBC. It is a complete and utter Mickey take. And the other What the Farage moment, big piece by Boris Johnson. He's now writing for the Mail. He did a big piece for them on Saturday. And in it, he was condemning Keir Starmer, he was condemning Ed Davey, and this time, no, nothing to do with the Post Office, but the fact that they had voted against our closer military action and support of Saudi Arabia. And Boris goes on to say the Houthis had it coming. Well, yes, that's true. But the one thing everybody has forgotten in this, including Boris Johnson, is that it was the Obama administration, supported by the European Union and absolutely supported by Boris Johnson when he was Foreign Secretary. They were all the ones who were for the so-called Iran nuclear deal. And that deal was, if we're nice to the Iranians, if we open up tens of billions of dollars, have access to dollars, billions of dollars for Iran, that somehow that's going to mean that they won't continue with their program of uranium enrichment and building their own nuclear bomb. And what actually has happened here is Iran is continuing apace and is now very close to having its own nuclear bomb. And all these tens of billions of dollars that we freed up for them, stuff that had previously been frozen, well, much of that has been used to fund Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. So, Boris, you can write your columns, you can condemn Keir Starmer and everybody else, but the fact is you, along with the other global leaders, got Iran completely and utterly wrong. And I have to say, one man who got this right all the way through was Donald J. Trump. And of that, there can be absolutely no doubt whatsoever. Now, in a moment, we'll talk Rwanda. It would seem, as the bill comes back to the House of Commons tomorrow, it would seem the Conservative Party is deeply and seriously split on this issue. But I wonder, whatever shape this legislation goes through, is it actually going to get through our own Supreme Court anyway? I doubt it.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Well, one of the reasons the Conservatives are doing so badly in the polls is, of course, the boats crossing the English Channel and their seeming total failure to deal with it at all. Ever since Rwanda was first promised, we've spent hundreds of millions of pounds. We've not sent a single person there. We've had problems with the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, and we've got a Conservative Party that is incredibly split. And yet, I wonder, with this vote tomorrow night and with these competing wings in the Conservative Party, and, you know, some Tory MPs think we should be sending everyone that crosses the English Channel to Rwanda. Some don't think we should be sending any at all. But I wonder, whatever shape this legislation goes through, whether actually it's going to get through the British courts. I'm joined down the line by immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson. Ivan, this is a highly contentious issue within the Conservative Party. Do we have any idea at the moment, with amendments that are being put down, what shape this bill is going to take over the next few days?
Yes, no, I think we have an idea what the government's proposing, because I feel sorry for Rishi Sunak because he's caught between a rock and a hard place. Because although the legislation says declaring Rwanda to be safe, and you'll remember back in December, the Supreme Court didn't accept assurances both by the government and by the UK government and Rwanda government that it was safe. They wouldn't accept that. And they didn't accept that those being sent to Rwanda would not face being sent back to a country where they may face persecution. So what the governments have to do is say, well, OK, we'll declare it safe, give it a statutory footing, and declare it safe by an act of parliament. Now, what's going to happen when it gets back to the court? Will the courts accept that? That's the first problem. The other problem is that they may declare it safe generally, but you can't possibly declare it safe if there are exceptional circumstances of individuals. And that's the issue that the government's in loggerhead with the Tory rights, because each individual can can actually resist being deported because his or her exceptional circumstances, compelling circumstances. I'll give you an example. You can say, well, I've got a mental health issue, so I can't be sent back to Rwanda. Now, the government has raised the evidential burden so high, they require evidence by way of a doctor's report, medical report. Now, the government in the bill have also said they've got a caveat that a minister can overrule any interim injunctions by Strasbourg. And you remember before the flights took off last time, Strasbourg issued an injunction stopping them on human rights grounds.
Yeah.
So although the minister can overrule the interim injunctions, they have to have a good reason for doing that. And if there's compelling evidence to say these people shouldn't be sent, then you can have judicial review applications of that decision. So we're going to go round and around, I'm afraid, back to the court, and ultimately the Supreme Court will have its say. When that will happen, I doubt it. It will be before the next general election.
Right, so basically what you're saying in terms of time frame, they're not going to get this through before the next election. So it's a huge internal row within the Conservative Party, but it's actually going to have no effect, in your opinion.
Yeah, it's not going to work because it's not compatible with the individual's right to resist deportation on exceptional but compelling grounds, on human rights grounds. So you can't possibly have a law which has a blanket rule saying everyone has to get sent back. Look, I'm in Dubai, and in Dubai, if you commit a crime, they put you on the next plane back to your country. That's what they do. There are no appeal courts. There's no, you haven't. If you commit a crime in Dubai, you are removed forthwith. In the UK, we have human rights laws which prevent that because everyone has a right to private and family life. So I'm afraid they've got to comply with that. While we're in the European Convention and while Strasbourg, we're under the remit of the jurisdiction of Strasbourg has a direct effect on us, I'm afraid we have to comply with it.
Yep, no, I understand that. Ivan Sampson, thank you very much indeed for the frankness of your opinions. And Ivan is right. He's right. Whatever you may think at home about this, all the while we are signed up to the European Convention on Human Rights. We will not be able to deport people to Rwanda. It is just as simple as that. And yet the government, the opposition, completely refuse to face up to that. In a moment, I'll be joined by Jason Miller. He's the senior advisor to Donald J. Trump. I'm going to ask him how good's he feeling about tonight's 7 p.m. caucus here in Iowa.
On Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, I am back with a bang. The former Immigration Minister, Robert Jemreg, gives his most honest and defiant interview to date.
All immigration is good, that diversity is strength. I think that's wrong.
The Rwanda rebel let rip on the government's failure to stop the boats.
My advice to the Prime Minister is you will not succeed unless you adopt this very robust approach, and then we will let the public down.
And in a mammoth week for Rishi Sunak, Jemreg has piled the pressure on.
We've done 3 failed bills in 3 years. It's 3 strikes or you're out.
Robert Jemreg unleashed on a special Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m. Be there.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So at 7 o'clock tonight, in over 1,500 locations across Iowa, people will gather, there'll be speeches made, and people will vote, and they'll choose who's their favourite person to be the Republican Party candidate for the election, in the general election in November. Well, I'm joined by Jason Miller, senior advisor to Donald J. Trump. And Jason, 2016, Ted Cruz won Iowa, beat Trump. You're feeling pretty optimistic, I think, today.
Feeling pretty good today, and so make sure folks in the UK know this is the first contest in the series to decide who's ultimately going to be the next Republican nominee and then President of the United States for the single-day voting this fall, or the period, but you have the one kind of ultimate general election. So the polling numbers look good. Our grassroots team is good. That's the difference between 2016 and now, is the structure, the turnout operation, because it's not as simple as just showing up and dropping off a ballot. You show up to a gymnasium or some local auditorium, you get together with your neighbors, you pick who the winner is going to be, and it's a lengthier process. So it's different than just drop that ballot and move on. So organization makes all the difference.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, Trump was very, very new at all of this back in 2016 and didn't have much experience. And so, you know, I get it. I mean, his team is much more, I have to say, Jason, you know, you guys are doing a very good job for him at the moment. His team is a lot more professional. How's he feeling about things?
He's feeling pretty good. And, you know, one of the things I say is, yes, of course, I'm part of his team. I'm one of his advisors. But it's always top-down leadership in these. President Trump, this is his third time running for president, so he knows it. He's not a rookie. He's a veteran now. He knows how this works. The other thing, too, is a lot of the Trump supporters are very experienced as well. They've shown up to the rallies. They've camped out overnight. They've stood in line for hours. So when you talk about really a key indicator, we have data points for hundreds of thousands of Iowans and know how to talk to them, how to communicate with them. We're pretty confident if you're going to camp out overnight for Trump rally tickets, you'll show up to caucus.
Now, the number that was suggested to me earlier by JL Partners, the polling firm, was that if Trump got less than 40%, questions would be asked, but if he got more than 50%, it's game over. Is that about right?
Don't go and raise expectations on me. I'm happy with a win. I'll take a win is a win is a win. So folks know that the record margin is 12 points from first place to second place. That was 1988. No Republican has ever gone above 50% in that threshold. So to the point that the pollster was saying 50% would be a smash record. Anything in between. But you know what? I am happy with just the win. Let's start with the win, then we'll go win in New Hampshire.
Now, a little bit of a thought about the other candidates here. You know, Haley clearly has picked up some support. DeSantis, by some measures, has disappointed. Ramaswamy makes a lot of noise, but shows great energy. But it does seem, Jason, looking at it, that it's all really pretty personal. Between, you know, Donald Trump, particularly Donald Trump and DeSantis, it's very personal, isn't it?
Well, I would. One could guess that if you read between the lines.
No,
or just
I don't need to read. Just listen to what he says, for goodness' sake.
He calls him Rob DeSanctimonious.
Yes.
And so it wouldn't change someone's name to DeSanctimonious. But here's the thing: President Trump effectively handpicked Rob DeSantis, to be the Republican nominee and then help him winning governor in 2018, and also with his reelect then in 2022. He picked Nikki Haley, who was then the governor of South Carolina, to then be his ambassador to the United Nations. So here are two folks who really owe their political careers to him, but now they're challenging him. And in a couple cases, they've gotten quite nasty about it.
So he feels let down by them?
I think he's disappointed, but also I think a bit, maybe a little more ornery than that when we talk about just the fact that these folks should have been helping him to win, because every dollar, every minute that is spent running against Rob DeSantis or Nikki Haley, it could be time or money spent on Joe Biden. And that's really what this, when you look at the thing, Nigel, that really made the polling take off, it was when people started seeing the general election polling of President Trump beating Joe Biden. That's when people said, let's rally around him, let's unify, because what Joe Biden has done to this country is pretty disastrous.
We're going to come to that. The other candidate that interests me is, I mentioned it earlier, Ramaswamy. I mean, and he says, look, you know, I am MAGA. I am very much on the same ticket as Donald Trump. I believe in the same values and the same things as Donald Trump. I'm just a different generation. Is he potentially... He's more of an ally than an opponent here, isn't he, really?
No, but he's gotten a little bit too cute, and that's where you saw President Trump turn his sights on him within the last couple of days here. Ramaswamy was having his people wear T-shirts that were saying, "Save Trump, vote Vivek." And so, he was caught on video talking to a lady saying that unless you vote for me, then they're going to take the nomination away from President Trump, give it to Nikki Haley, who's a globalist warmonger.
That's his story, yeah.
And it was way too cute. And at that point, I think that's where President Trump said, "Hey, enough is enough. I got to go and let people know that this is."
So he
too
just
cute.
sort of tapped him down a little bit.
I think that's probably a polite way to say it, but this is when President Trump does it, it's like Thanos from the Avengers.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. Although I do think that Ramaswamy has a future in the conservative movement here in America.
I think he has a very good line, very good delivery. I think he's going to have to grow up a bit as a candidate, but I'm worried more about President Trump, and I'll no more free advice from Mr. Ramaswamy.
That was funny. I got to Chicago, flew out on Saturday, got to Chicago. The rest of the journey was a nightmare, but literally, I walked out of the front doors of Chicago Airport. I walked a few yards up to the left, where I was confronted by a drug-crazed person. I mean, literally out of his head. He started kind of squaring up to me, and you think, well, how do I handle this? You know, he might have a knife in his pocket. As it was, he was so out of his head, but I was able to very quickly walk round. And there we are. That happened to me on Saturday in Chicago at the airport. The situation with law and order in America's cities is disturbing, to say the least. And yet, I didn't hear Trump talking about that much yesterday.
He's worked it in quite a bit of late because the open border situation we have where people are coming in unvetted, and to put in comparison, we're at 10,000 people a day coming across. That's 300,000 then in a month, over 3 million in a year. And those are just the ones that we think are coming through, completely unvetted. A lot of these people are not coming from Central America or South America either. A lot of people coming from Asia, a lot of people coming from Africa, completely unvetted. I know the UK has its own crisis with people coming across in the inflatables.
We do, but nothing like the crisis here.
Nothing like this. I mean, this is because you can cross over by land. This is pretty dangerous. So when we see the fentanyl use, the drug use, the crime, the homelessness, all these different things going on, it's really quite scary. And I know President Trump in the past has always said that Paris isn't Paris anymore. That was a frequent refrain in the 2016 campaign. Sadly, New York isn't New York anymore. Chicago isn't Chicago anymore. Every big American major city is in dire straits right now.
Yeah, I mean, very serious. It's a very serious situation. And yet, Jason, I understand the upset that's being felt by tens of millions of Americans about this. Has Trump got solutions to this?
Absolutely. Well, big part is we got to secure the border. That's the number one.
How do you do that physically?
Well, finish the wall. We go and actually get with Title 42 and remain in Mexico. Those are two big steps. But the other thing, too, is we have to send the message that if people get here, they're not going to be just showered with all sorts of benefits and be allowed to have several years until they actually have a deportation hearing. We'll have the largest deportation effort in American history. Get that going. So that's part of it. The other thing, too, is the economy. You look at so much of it. It's not just the border. The border is a big part, but you look especially in our urban centers where inflation has priced people out of their homes. That's why you see homelessness spiking. Number one thing you can do on inflation, if you're an executive, is with energy. To go and get energy costs down. You get the cost of gas down, all energy.
Hence the Trump refrain, drill, baby, drill.
Drill, baby, drill. So those are the big things that he can do on day one. And I think that's also what sets him apart from anyone else is since he's been president, we know how he's going to govern. A lot of these things you can do by executive order, meaning the president can just sign it as opposed to having to go to Congress and take months or even years to try to get it done. So day one, he can do something about inflation and he can do something about the border.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no question, bar some extraordinary event, he's going to win tonight. He's going to be the Republican candidate. The polls suggest at the moment he's leading in the key swing states by quite big margins. So it's all looking good for your campaign.
And one other thing to point out is that number of constituencies that Democratic Party, Joe Biden's party, take for granted: African Americans, Latino Americans, Asian Americans, young voters, independents. All of those core groups that the Democrats take for granted, President Trump is winning with. President Trump is actually winning with Hispanic voters right now. And so it just shows how far off things have fallen for Joe Biden.
And the whole axis of where the Republican Party is in terms of support has changed under Trump dramatically. The country club Republican Party is gone in many, many ways. But Jason, looked at from the rest of the world, we've got a series of indictments here. The man is in court almost every week. His ability to campaign over the course of this year will be seriously curtailed. The case, particularly in Georgia, looks very awkward. How does Trump get through these legal difficulties?
Great question. So especially if you're looking from across the pond and wondering what's going on with all
we can't believe it.
Well, so one thing, I wouldn't cede that necessarily any of these cases on the criminal side or with the ballot access issues are going to be an issue this year. We don't know because of the timings with the appeals. The Supreme Court has to make some decisions about which cases can go forward and can't. So could there be cases in 2024? Yes. Is there a scenario that none of those cases actually come up? Absolutely. But I think that it's baked in the cake now to where voters see what's going on. The more that he goes up, the more they come after him with more cases. Yeah. And American voters are pretty smart. They can realize, wait a minute, why is all this happening now? Not several years ago. Why, or in some of these things, they're coming after things like, decade old, decade and a half old. I think people get it and they realize that this is election interference.
Well, it's doing him no harm at the moment. Jason Miller, thank you very much indeed for joining me. We'll see you again over the course of the next few months. Now, back in the London studio, we have Sir John Hayes, Conservative Member of Parliament. I've got the last couple of minutes with him. Sir John, it would appear over Rwanda policy that your party is more divided than it's almost ever been.
Between those of us who want this bill to work and those who are less certain about that. But certainly all of the Conservatives I speak to that have signed the amendments that are tabled by Robert Jenrick and Bill Cash want to stop the boats, want the bill to work, want to end this tide of illegal immigration, Nigel.
No, well, illegal immigration, we're discussing it. Sir John, you're discussing it. I was discussing it here with Jason Miller a moment ago. It is a very real issue. But Ivan Sampson was on a bit earlier, the immigration lawyer, and a very fair-minded man. And he says, ultimately, all the while we're part of the European Convention on Human Rights, we'll never, ever be able to get the Rwanda plan to work.
Well, the European Convention is something I think we should leave. I mean, I believe in leaving the ECHR, but we can't do that now, sadly. And this convention doesn't prohibit states from doing what the bill contemplates, namely outsourcing asylum claims, making sure they're processed offshore. Now, there are some lawyers who will disagree with that. No doubt it will face challenges. We've got to do what the British people asked us to take back control of our borders.
Well, Sir John, you're absolutely right. The British people did instruct you to take back control of our borders. The Brexit vote told you to take back control of our borders. And I don't doubt the sincerity of you, of Bill Cash, of many of the others. But I do genuinely think that all the while we're part of the ECHR, we'll never solve it. Maybe put it in a manifesto. Anyway, it's over from me. Let's now have a look at the all-important weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, very good evening to you. I'm Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. The cold theme's set to continue and so it will stay frosty and icy at times with some snow showers too, but there is also the potential for some heavy persistent snow across northern parts as we go into Tuesday in association with a weather system currently towards the northwest of the UK. However, as we go through this evening and overnight, it's going to be cold, it's going to be frosty. We will see further snow showers feeding down on a brisk northerly wind, so particularly across northern Scotland and anywhere exposed to that northerly wind, that's where we're most likely to see the snow showers. Elsewhere, further inland, largely dry with some clear skies, and under the clear skies, a widespread frost. Coldest across parts of Scotland could get into negative double figures. As we go through Tuesday then, for much of England and Wales, and actually a largely fine day. Again, some winter sunshine around, but further north, the potential for some persistent snow to push in across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England, and particularly across Scotland. Could see more than 10 centimetres of snow perhaps, and so that could cause some significant disruption. Again, it is going to be a cold day, temperatures a little bit below average for the time of year. As we look towards Wednesday, and there is a feature towards the south of the UK, currently likely just to stay to the south of us, but the potential it could bring a bit of significant snow to southern parts of the UK. Further north,